Ask Joe, #190.
Hello and welcome to the very first Home Studio Corner podcast of the year of our Lord 2017. I'm glad to be back. Took a few weeks off, you may have noticed, at the end of the year to spend time with family. And instead of busting myself to pre-record episodes to put out, I just stopped all production of everything for the end of the year. And it was good, but I missed you and I'm glad to be back. I've got a lot of fun things planned for 2017. The center of which will be obviously this show every Tuesday, 1 p.m. Central. If you can make it, come out and hang out in the live chat. You have a really good chance of getting your question answered if you're in the live chat, or you can follow me on Facebook and ask questions there as well. But it's every Tuesday, 1 p.m. Central. If you need the link, head over to homestudiocorner.com/calendar. You'll see it. It'll show up on your calendar, so you have no excuse to not come hang out with the rest of us. So how are you? I hope you've had a good holiday season, and Christmas, New Year, all that stuff was really fun for me. With 3-year-old twin girls and then a 6-year-old boy, we had a lot of fun, and really just enjoyed it. So I don't have much to talk about. There's not much of a rant today, unless one just happens to bubble up out of me. But a couple things I want to talk about. One is I am going to be releasing a lot of music in 2017. So that's what I'm going to talk about in a second. So stay tuned for that. But a couple of smaller things. One, if you were going to be at Winter NAMM out in Anaheim, California, it is, I believe it begins January 19th. That Thursday through Sunday. I'm going to be down there. So I've never actually gone to Winter NAMM. Shame on me. I've been to Summer NAMM a few times, which is here in Nashville, but I've not been to Winter NAMM, which from what I gather is the bigger of the NAMMs. And I'm excited. I know Graham Cochran's going to be there. Bjorgvin Benedictson's going to be there. Rob Mazes from HomeStudioCenter.com, who I just did an interview with, is going to be there. I might get to see Ronan. I'm going to hang out with my boys at PreSonus at their booth quite a bit as well. So if you're going to make it, if you can get there, I forget how it works with the public passes and stuff. I think maybe Saturday's the public day. I don't know. But it's just a big trade show, mainly geared towards music merchants, so people like Sweetwater and small mom and pop stores. But all the manufacturers are there showing off their latest stuff. There's classes. And anyway, I'm excited to be there. And if you can come, please let me know. I will do a meetup. I'll do whatever I can to make sure we get to hang out at some point at Winter NAMM. Now, for the main event of today, I will be, when I was thinking through what I wanted to do in 2017, right, as we tend to do at the end of the year, thinking through things that went well in 2016 and things that I want to do better. And obviously, I want to make more music, and I want to release more music and hopefully play more shows and do all that. But I do feel like, and I talked about this somewhere else on an article, I think I was a little premature with the band thing. We played a few shows. I got to be the Lightning 100 Local Artist of the Week, and that was great. But it's still a little backwards to the point of, not backwards, just I don't have a big enough local following to continue to do full band shows and be able to actually play pay the band, and not making much from the shows as of yet. So, sorry, there's a fly in here. So what I need to do is continue to play a lot of shows and play music and build up my following on that side of things to where I can support bringing out bands and things like that. I would like for music to be, the music part of it to be all self-supporting if possible. So that's a little bit of something I'm working around, and a part of that is going to be releasing a lot of music. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to release 4 EPs this year. So 1 per quarter of the year, and they'll be evenly spaced out, with the first one being in February. So I'm excited about that. I'm honestly trying to figure out how February is going to work. My drummer, Tim, is on tour most of the month, so I need to call him later today and see if there's a way we can work it out. Otherwise, it'll be maybe an acoustic EP or something like that without a full band, but we'll do a full band one for sure in the summer. It lines up with the RPM challenge, if you're familiar with that. I've never done it, but a lot of people I know have, which is a challenge. It's just an online community where they all, in the month of February, they write, record, and release an album of 10 songs or more. And so I don't know if I'm going to do a full 10-song album just based on time and other things I have going on, but I do want to write, or maybe not write, but at least record, mix, and release something in February. So there will be plenty of content around that. I'll be talking about it, I'm sure, here on the podcast. But especially the biggest place where you can go if you want to follow that process is to become a VIP member. If you didn't know, I have a VIP membership. It's $10 a month, and you get the backlog of, I want to say, close to hundreds of hours of content now of VIP training sessions and behind-the-scenes sessions and mixed critiques and all these things that I do for my VIP members. But they're going to get all the behind-the-scenes stuff of those EPs as I create them throughout the year. So if you're thinking about joining and you like to see my process, now's a good time, because I'll be doing a lot of my process over the next over the next year, really. And these will all be challenges that I'm going to encourage my VIP members to join me in. If you don't want to do a full EP on a given month and you just want to do a single or a 24-hour challenge or a SM57 challenge or any of those kind of challenges, I'm going to ask you to join me in doing that. Because I've seen such good results from people who take the time to jump in and try these challenges, and they surprise themselves with how good their stuff turns out, even when they're under all these different constraints. So I'm very excited about that. And what else? Christmas came. Somebody asked me on Facebook, what did I get for Christmas? I didn't get much. We gave a lot of presents to our kids. The two things I'm excited about, one, this is nerdy, but this giant water bottle, Hydro Flask. They're not a advertiser or anything, but it's this giant water bottle that keeps the water nice and cool for a long time, so I drink more water. That's nice. And then the nerdiest thing is this. This is just a planner, a year planner. I've never been a planner guy. I've been a notebook guy, and I just kind of make it be what I want it to be. But this thing has been awesome at helping me focus and think through kind of what my weeks look like and what I'm going to focus on and make sure I get to all the things that are most important. So I like nerdy things like writing things on paper with a pen. So, you probably can't relate to me at all, but someone out there likes paper and pen as well. All right, without further ado, I think it's time to say boom and to jump into all of your lovely little questions. Boom. All right, I'm going to snag up the Facebook questions first, and then I'll jump in and get all the live streamers. But a few folks asked stuff on Facebook. Brett asked what Santa brought me. Already answered that one. Let's see, what else? Dom says, I have a technical question. Is it safe to keep on the phantom power on a USB sound card? Thanks. I wouldn't say it's unsafe, as in it's likely to catch fire. But if there's no reason to leave it on, if there's an ability to turn it on and off, I'd probably turn it off. That's what I do here with my preamps over here in the rack. When they require phantom power, it's on, but then I turn them off. And my tube preamps, I turn off entirely, the entire thing. My Eureka, the switch is on the back, so I just leave it on all the time, which is pretty typical too. As far as USB, if it's bus powered, as in it's only getting its power from the USB bus, I would question whether it has enough juice to actually send the full 48 volts of phantom power down the line anyway. So an external I almost said sour supply. An external power supply would be a good idea regardless. So I'd say if you can turn it off, turn it off. If you can't, I wouldn't worry about it. Peter says, we'll be doing a lot of gentle finger-style acoustic recording, so interested to hear the point of miking a little closer to the guitar. So you've heard me say this before. If you're doing finger-style guitar just quieter things like that, with a big strumming guitar with a pick, you can mic the guitar a foot away a lot of times and get a good full sound. The closer you get, the boomier it gets. With fingerstyle guitar, if you mic it from that far away, it's such a quiet signal that you end up picking up a lot more room in addition to the guitar. So you end up with probably a little bit thinner sounding guitar recording and a lot of room noise. So my exception to the rule of don't mic it too closely would be if it's some sort of fingerstyle thing where you just get in there as close as you can, still listening back to make sure it's not boomy, but close enough to where it gets nice and full and it picks it up without it picking up tons of extra room sound. It's still going to be noisy. I mean, there are people I know who use really nice equipment, really nice studios, major label releases. When they do fingerstyle stuff, if you listen to the recordings, especially if there's sections where it's just the guitar by itself, you will still hear some noise, whether it's preamp noise or room noise, I don't know, but that's pretty typical. I wouldn't get too hung up on it. I just think you'll get a fuller recording by moving the mic a little bit closer when it's fingerstyle. Just like if I'm singing something and it's a really quiet, low, sultry song, I'm probably going to get a little closer to the microphone to make it feel a little bit bigger and a little bit warmer. If I back up way over here and try to sing really soft, it's going to have a different tone. Not necessarily right or wrong, but I'm guessing for a song like that, that would be wrong. So hopefully that answers your question, Mr. Peter. All right, we have Peter number 2 with a question. This is Peter from, Peter, I just forgot. Sweden, right? Peter Kish, one of my VIP members. I always forget. Peter wanted me to do the Star Wars theme. Hang on, I got to go through the chat again. Yes, Sweden, that's right. Okay. Peter says, the old mixed translation question again. I know, but over the years, have you changed how you check that your mixes translates to different playback systems? Okay. If you've never heard this question before, never heard this topic, I'm going to summarize it briefly and kind of tell you where I sit right now as it relates to things like getting your mix to translate. So the idea, when you first get into mixing and you're listening to something in your studio and you get it to a point where it sounds good, there's a good chance when you go listen to that in your car, in your home theater system, on earbuds while you're jogging, it's going to sound way worse, or at least way different. And that's this idea of learning how to make your mixes translate to where they sound consistent, from whether it's a tiny little crappy speaker to a full range PA system and everything in between. And there's really no shortcut to making that work or making that happen faster. The only thing is it's a matter of learning what your room sounds like, what your speakers and headphones sound like, and what good mixes sound like on them, and then working to make your mixes sound fairly similar to those in terms of balance of frequencies, balance of instruments, and things like that. For me, when you're starting out, and even the first several years of mixing, there's almost no substitute for going out and checking your mix in your car, on earbuds and on the places where you normally listen to music. Because, of course, you want your mix to stand up next to anything else that you might play through that system. And so for a while, that's the only way to solve the problem of it not translating, is to constantly be going back and forth. When you get done in the studio, you make a CD or put it on your iPhone, and you listen in your car all week, and you're making notes of things that don't sound right in your car that you didn't notice in your studio. And then you go back to your studio the next time you're there and you try to make those changes. What I found is a lot of times the changes that I hear in my car, for example, the things that stand out that don't sound very good, when I go back to the studio, I don't really hear those nearly as problematic. But more importantly, when I fix those problems, it doesn't really change too much how the mix sounds in my studio. It only sounds better in the car. So that's an interesting little piece of advice to kind of hang on to. But yeah, for many years, for me, it was going back and forth, listening in my studio, then listening in the car, and then kind of comparing notes in my head, coming back to the studio and working to try to make those two sound closer, by changing how I handle the low end, changing how I handle the top end, the balance of instruments, all those normal things that we talk about in mixing. Now, for me now, in 2017, having been, I'm sorry, I keep shaking the desk and the camera starts shaking like it's an earthquake. In 2017, I don't do as much checking of my mixes. I still check it, but I've found over the last several years that when I do check it, it sounds how I expect it to sound. Now, is that because I have golden years and I'm just an awesome mixer? No, not really. It's because I've just done it a lot. And so when I did a project this week for a client, mixed and mastered 2 songs, or mixed 2, and I'm waiting to hear back to get the go-ahead to master, but I did everything here in the studio, and I checked on my headphones because that's valuable to me. I still need to go back and forth, especially dealing with the low end and making sure that's right. But when I listened to the songs up in the living room in our little Bose system, they sounded fine. Nothing stood out to me as different. Honestly, I just listened for a second and I said, yeah, that sounds about right. I wanted my wife to hear the song, and that was it. So for me, I don't do much active trying to make things translate. It just kind of happens now, and that comes out from putting in the hard work and making your song sound good on all different systems. Even if it requires a lot of extra work, it's worth that extra effort. That's a good question. It's an answer that a lot of people don't want to hear. They'd love for me to tell them, hey, you just need this plug-in and it'll do it for you. You don't even have to learn how to mix. Okay, let's go over to the live stream, by the way. If you want to join us live, Tuesdays, 1 p.m. Central, there's a link over at homestudiocorner.com/calendar. I stream this over on the YouTubes. Let's see if we have some questions from the folks who are here in the live chat. Let's see. Brian Schaff says, how much is too much for a PreSonus Eureka? Hoping the deal near me is good, $300. Yeah, $300 sounds about right. I've seen them around Nashville used for, I want to say maybe I've seen them for $200 or $300, but that feels about right. They were $500 or $600 new, and they don't make them anymore, so that feels right. I've kept saying I would like a second one to have two, but I probably never will. This one is actually, I haven't used it in a while. It's got some sort of ground loop thing. I don't know if it's a power supply. There's something, a little hum in there, so I haven't used it in a while. Need to get that fixed. Dion says, what's your take on standalone A to D and D to A converters versus, excuse me, I keep having these weird hiccup things, versus an interface that already has built-in A to Ds and D to As. So A to D, D to A, analog to digital, digital to analog. It's really there. When I worked at Sweetwater, this was years ago, there was a little more of an appeal to the idea of you could have something like a PreSonus, an Avid or DigiDesign at the time, M-Box, but then you could use an Apogee Rosetta 200 to get two channels of just strictly analog to digital and digital to analog conversion. The idea being converters are only as good as their cheapest components. Better converters have better analog componentry, which makes them sound better, more pure. You know, you hear all the catchphrases of a better converter gives you a better stereo image when you're listening through that, and then all your recordings sound more clear, blah, 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 blah. My take on that, I am sure there is benefit to, if you've got, like, let's say you've got one of the PreSonus FireWire boxes that has ADAT inputs, so you could run something like an Apogee Rosetta 800, or I don't know what the current ones are anymore. I'm using older technology, but you could use Antelope makes those. Isn't Antelope when they make clocks? There's one I'm trying to think of that's slipping my mind. RME makes some. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You could use those to bypass the built-in converters on your interface and get nicer converters. So the signal gets converted to a digital signal and then comes through a digital cable into your audio interface, which then connects to your computer and brings it in. So that's the idea behind it. I personally, I've had nicer converters. I've had a clock once, a Big Ben that I won in a contest, but I just don't see a huge benefit to it. I think there's a place to upgrade those, but for me, there are so many other upgrades that need to happen first before I think you'll even be able to hear the difference. And even then, I don't know. I don't think I could see myself ever dropping $2,000 on something that literally has no color and just convert something from analog to digital and back out. I would much rather spend that $2,000 on a nice tube preamp that has a different tone, or a nice guitar amp that has a tone that I don't already have with the amps that I own, or a microphone or a guitar or any number of things, better speakers, acoustic treatment, all those things I feel like have bigger contributions to the sound of your mixes and your recordings than just changing out the converter. Now, could I be wrong? Absolutely. But in my experience, if you listen to my music and you think it sounds pretty good, I've improved over the years in my technique first and foremost, in being a better musician and a better engineer and developing better ears. And then I've improved the gear as well. I've got nicer guitars than I did 10 years ago. I've got nicer, not really, my microphones are kind of the same, but I've got nicer preamps. And then I don't have any nicer plugins or converters or speakers. I'm on the same speakers I had 8 years ago when I won them in a Christmas song contest at Sweetwater. And I don't have any plans to change them until, fingers crossed, they die, which I hope they never do, because I don't want to learn new speakers. So you'll find that if you hang out around Nashville, for example, you'll hear of people. It's not uncommon to be talking to somebody and say, yeah, so-and-so who's, big name engineer. He's on a Pro Tools 6 system with an old Mac G3 or G4, desktop computer using, Tiger operating system or whatever one of the older Apple operating systems is. And that's his system. And he uses it day in and day out. And he makes great recordings. Oh, and he's using the old 888 DigiDesign converters that aren't nearly as good as the 96IO, which aren't nearly as good as the 192IO, and blah, 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 blah. The thing is, just because something's better doesn't mean what you have is inferior. And I think that's what people need to figure out. Just because I have a better guitar than you doesn't mean your guitar is bad. Just because you have a better car than me doesn't mean my car is bad. It just means yours is technically better, but mine actually might be better for me anyway. So, as you could imagine, that was going to be my answer. I'm not big. I'm probably never going to steer you towards a better converter unless you've perfected everything else in the entire signal chain, and then maybe. But even then, if you're not happy with your recordings at that point, something else is wrong. Snidley Whiplash says, how far are you with your mixed together videos? Good question. If you go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Home Studio Corner, and then you click on playlists, then you'll see, let me find it, hold on. You'll see the mixed together series. I'm on video number 9, just released it yesterday. So there's 10 videos total. The first is an intro video, and the rest are 1 through 9 of Mixed Together, which if you don't know what that is, if you've been on another planet, Mixed Together is a series of videos I'm doing for free on YouTube where I'm mixing a song start to finish, and you can get the tracks if you sign up for my email newsletter over at homestudiocorner.com, and you can mix it yourself. Isn't that nice? All right, Dion says, I'll be at Black Diamond Strings booth at NAMM. Sweet. Remind me. Email me, Dion. Especially like during the show. I'll forget. I just think I'll forget. But I want to come see you. And I don't know much about Black Diamond Strings. You'll have to sell me on them. Everyone loves live music, but no one wants to pay for it. Somebody said earlier. I think everyone loves all sorts of music and don't want to pay for it. It's just an interesting thing. In Studio One, what purpose does the phase meter serve? It looks cool, but I have no idea what it is telling me and how it's supposed to help me in my mixes. That's a question from my boy, David Pratt. The only time I use a phase meter is when I think there's a stereo track, a stereo recording that I think is out of phase. Or even a master. Occasionally there's been a master that's out of phase, which is rough. The idea, great way to experiment with it, David. Take a guitar track. So open a blank session, throw a guitar track in there. Duplicate the guitar track, and then just delay the second one. Or put a delay plugin on there and set it to 100% wet delay with no repeats, and just delay it by 10, 20 milliseconds. And then pan them left and right. What you'll hear is it sounds sort of stereo. And it is, because something's different coming out of left and right. A lot of people do that to take a single guitar and make it sound what they think is stereo. It is, but it's not. You're putting it completely out of phase. So what it actually sounds like is like your speakers are making your head want to turn. It doesn't sound natural. It doesn't sound nearly the same as if you mic'd it with 2 guitars or 2 microphones, or if you recorded it twice and actually doubled it. So if you pull up the phase meter on your mix bus and look at it, you'll see the shape will look kind of funny, but the thing I look at is the correlation meter at the bottom. If the correlation meter is in the plus, it means everything's in phase. If it goes into the minus, which it will do if you do this test, then it's out of phase. And so for me, when I'm listening to something, if you record acoustic guitar with 2 microphones, but they're out of phase with one another, or you don't do the placement very well, then you might think, yeah, that sounds kind of phasey. And the one way you can check is by putting a phase meter on whatever bus or if it's a stereo track, on that track or on your mix bus, and just solo it however you want to do it. And that correlation meter will tell you whether they're in phase or not. Now, for me, it's not a make or break tool. It's just one where I think I hear it, but I'm not sure. And then I'll put that phase meter on, and it'll verify maybe what I'm hearing. And then the solution a lot of times is to, if it's just a recording that's maybe out of phase, is instead of panning it hard left and right, narrow the panning until that correlation meter goes all positive. For something about narrowing it down makes it a little more mono. Mono stuff is 100% positive on the correlation meter. Stereo is anywhere between 0 and 100, and then out of phase is negative. So if you narrow something down, it makes it more mono and a little more friendly with the phase meter. It's kind of dorky, nerdy stuff, but it's good to know on occasion. The big takeaway here is don't try to duplicate a track and process one differently from the other and pan them left and right and pretend you have stereo. You don't have stereo, you don't have stereo, you don't have stereo. I'm going to say that a million times and people are still not going to get it. That's okay. Craig Higgins says, Joe, do you avoid including cymbals / overheads when parallel compressing the drums? Good question. Normally I don't. Normally I just parallel compress everything. So all my drums, compressor, mix knob, or 2 buses, everything going, the same thing going through both buses and heavily compress one. However, if you watch my Mix Together series, video number 7 says trying something new with overhead and room mics. You'll notice I did, it's not exactly parallel processing, but I ran my overhead in my rooms to its own bus, to their own bus, and then I ran the kick, snare, toms, hi-hat, all these spot mics to a second bus, to a separate bus. And I added my bus compressor to the spot mic bus and left the overhead and room mic bus alone. So you get all the benefits of that bus compression on your kick and your snare and your toms and things like that, but it doesn't touch your rooms and your overheads. So it allows the cymbals to ring out more nicely. You don't get quite the pumping and breathing that you can get if you put it on your actual track itself. So that's not exactly parallel processing, but it's a variation of that works kind of cool. My buddy Tim Horsley does that all the time with his drums. He sends his overhead in his rooms out the main output, and he sends everything else to his drum bus, and he does all the bus processing there. It's a cool way to do it so you don't overdo it and get a lot of that washy cymbal sound with too much compression happening. Brian, any knowledge you can share about dB, FS, dB, VU, RMS, etc.? Yeah, briefly. I mean, I don't know much about VU measurements and what that means, because you just don't run into it anywhere in a typical home studio, so don't worry about that. dBFS stands for decibels full scale. That just means in a digital system, 0, anything at 0 or above is clipping, everything below is a negative number. So if my mix clips at negative, the loudest part of my mix is -2 dB, that's -2 dB full scale. It's different than if you look on a mixer where there's a U or a 0 where the unity spot is on the fader, and then it allows you to go plus or minus. That's kind of the VU thing, I think. I don't exactly know, and it doesn't really matter. RMS is just fancy for average. If you look at a mix, you've got the peaks. The loudest peak might be at -1 dB, and the lowest peak might be somewhere else, but the average volume of everything is the RMS. So when people talk about RMS, I know it's not technically average. It means root mean squared, something mathematical. If you really want to get into the nerdiness of it, my buddy Ian Shepard has a lot of material on this on his website, productionadvice.co.uk. But honestly, the bigger thing I would say is I don't think you really need to know it all that much. I've never had a mix be like, I've never had a situation where my knowledge of the different types of decibels has helped me make a better piece of music. So I'm not bashing you. I know some people just have a natural thirst for that kind of information. Go for it if you want to, but not at the expense of learning about actual making music and actually making music. Rob Wing says, Joe, can you talk about inspiration? I just moved and built a new studio. I haven't done any real work since last summer, and now I'm having trouble getting going. Man, I get it. Man, I don't know. I think motivation is one of those things that, for some people in some seasons of life, something like a Zig Ziglar tape can be really motivating. Other times you have to just force yourself to do it, even though you don't feel like doing it. And that probably is where you're at, Rob. You have to decide, is this something I want to do? And really decide, like, do you want to keep doing music? Do you want to keep making music in a home studio? And don't say yes just because you built a new studio. If the answer is no, the answer is no. And don't carry around all that shame about how much music you're not making if it's just not really something that you want to do. I think that's okay. And I think you need the freedom to give yourself that option. But my guess is, Rob, you've been around a long time in home studio corner world. My guess is you want to. Maybe you're just burnt out, or maybe you don't have a project you're excited about. Something I've done that's consistently helped me get motivated is to do stupid things like my Write 50 Songs in 12 Weeks challenge. This year, releasing 4 EPs, all done within a month period. It's stressful and it's scary, and there's the big, massive potential to fail, but there's also a lot of motivation behind it because you're telling the world about it, and your world could literally just be your spouse and your kids or your few friends or your people on Facebook, or if you've got a bigger following somewhere else. I like to just put it out there for everybody because it kind of forces me to get to work. Now, I will say I've done the same thing about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. I posted on my Facebook, just my personal Facebook account, that, hey, it's been too long. I've got this much weight to lose, and I've decided I'm going to do it. And I'm sure we've all seen those posts, especially in the last couple weeks. But I didn't keep it, and I'm now heavier than I was when I wrote that. So just putting it out there isn't a magic pill. But if it's something you really want to do, and then you put yourself out there and you give yourself some sort of crazy deadline or a crazy challenge, or maybe for you, Rob, since you haven't done any work in so long, maybe just give yourself a single song project to do. Like your next free weekend, take 3 to 4 hours in an afternoon and do a complete song from start to finish, and just do it. Things like that might get the wheels churning and get you get some momentum going to kind of then move forward and do something else. Or maybe it means you need to get a friend in there who's been asking to record, or who makes music, and bring them in to do a free session, something where it's not your music, you're working on somebody else's. I don't know your specific situation, Rob, but those are some ideas. Another thing, and this is the one that's hard to say, but I don't know, maybe you're watching too much home studio corner videos versus actually making music. I can relate. I've got different hobbies that I have that aren't related to music, where I'll watch people's YouTube channels about it, and it can be a nice way to relax and get new information, get excited about something. But usually it makes me want to go do the thing. If I find myself spending all my time learning about something and not actually doing it, that's a red flag for me that maybe I just need to go do the thing or stop altogether, because I'm not really doing anything productive just by watching. So I don't want you to go anywhere, Rob. Don't get that from me. But if watching Home Studio Corner is becoming an excuse where you feel like you're doing music, you feel like you're doing something productive because at least you're watching Joe talk about audio, but you're not actually getting any work done in the studio, which is really what you want to do. You don't really want to learn more about audio. You want to make good music. And that's why you like Home Studio Corner to begin with. But at some point, you may need to cut me loose for a few months and go make some music and then come back. I mean, that's not what I want, but it might be a good thing to check out, or at least think about. Ian DeShong, would you ever want to send a track to a bus as well as route it? Would it be too many copies of one event? And do you prefer to route your buses to a sub or straight to the master bus? I don't do a submix bus anymore. I don't send a track to multiple buses unless I'm doing something specific, like I've got my drum bus and then I create a snap bus just for kick and snare that I heavily compress to get a little more snap out of them in a dense mix. Other than that, I don't tend to route things to multiple places just by default. But yes, I've got everything going through drum space, guitar, vocal, keys, buses that I have set up in my template, and then those are all routed to my main bus. Occasionally, I'll route all the instruments to a band bus. If for some reason I need to bring the band down without turning the vocals down, or automate the whole band up and down based on something, that's just very rare, but occasionally I'll do that. Joe, what's your opinion on using new or worn strings when recording guitar? It totally depends on the guitar. My guitars, like this one, this J45, when the strings start to get old, it just does not hold a tune very well. So for just the sheer fact that it's annoying when the strings are old to record is enough motivation for me to change the strings. Also, it's a darker sounding guitar, so the newer strings brighten it up and balance it out nicely. For like that Taylor over there, it's pretty bright. So I would maybe either put pretty thick strings on there or change the strings a few days before the session to let them chill out a little bit, because they can be really bright. If it's bright new strings on a bright guitar, then yeah, changing them on the day of the session might make for a kind of harsher sound. So those are my thoughts there. Aslan wants to start film scoring in Studio One. I am not your man, but good luck. I'm sure there's somebody out there talking about it. Which is a better choice, the PreSonus RM16 rack mount mixer or the Studio 192? And for someone on a budget, what interface would you suggest? The audio box with Studio One Artist or the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2? I have one of the audio boxes, the one with 4 channels. I like it. It works well. It's over there. See it in that right there? It's good. I like PreSonus, so I tend to lean towards that. As far as the PreSonus RM16 versus the Studio 192, I don't know the RM16 very well at all, so can't really answer that one. Like I said, I just kind of focus on what I have. I don't really go and research a lot of their equipment until I'm ready to buy something. So I'm not going to be a good source of advice on gear that's out there for the most part. When producing, this is from James, when producing your own album, do you complete one song at a time or do you record all the songs, then all the mixing and so on? I tend to do everything in phases. So all the scratch tracks, all the drums, all the bass, all the guitars, all the vocals, all the extra stuff, and then mix. Occasionally, once everything's recorded, I may finish recording one particular song, and I will go ahead and mix that one. I did that for my album Better This Way. I finished the song Feel first. That's the first one I had done guitars and vocals on. It was finished, so we actually mixed it in dueling mixes, and then later went on to finish everything else. But yeah, I like to kind of do them all in the same. I don't like to finish a song and then move on to the next one, mainly because there's no point. If I'm doing a 10-song album, I'm not going to schedule 10 different drum recording sessions with my drummer. That's just a waste of both of our time. So I get everything ready, and we record all the drums in a day, and that's kind of how we go about it. Spiro says, thinking about your experience in regards to songwriting, I end up with tons of snippets of music, but I have a hard time finishing projects. What would be the top things to do to achieve this? I would say, as dumb as this sounds, I would say just finish them. Don't worry about it being good. Just worry about it being finished. So if you think, I like this little clip, but the rest of the part of it's cheesy, don't make it, try to make it a little less cheesy if you can, but go ahead and finish the song. I've talked about this before. When I was doing my 50-song challenge, I had to go with any idea that came to my head because I had to write. Some days I was writing 4 songs in a day because I procrastinated and had to catch up at the end. And when you have to write 4 songs in a morning, you just don't have time to really hem and haw about, is this idea good enough? If I had an idea, I ran with it. The big one I talk about all the time is the song about a turtle. I thought about I'd seen a turtle the other day, and I started writing a song. The first line was literally, I saw a turtle the other day, and then I went on to write a song about how the turtle, when he's scared, he pulls himself inside his shell to keep safe, and I made a parallel comparison to how I do that in my own life of when I'm scared of things, I pull in my shell to keep myself safe, but I end up missing out on good things because of it. And that song ended up on my album. It's called Shell. I changed the first line because I saw a turtle the other day is a horrible line. But that song still made it. Had I been in the position of being, turning my nose up, turning my nose up at any idea that didn't seem great, I would have missed out on that song. So I would say just get in the process of finishing, regardless of how good they are, and you'll find a lot of them turn out pretty good. Let me do a couple more. My voice is starting to get shot, but I want to, first podcast of the year, I want to make sure I answer lots of questions. What is your take on level matching and the problems that come with subtractive, and additive EQ? Sorry, piece of ice jumped in my mouth. So level matching, I think, is really important when you're adding EQ or compression. It needs to be, for the most part, especially with compression, when you bypass the plugin or that effect, it needs to still sound at the same volume. Otherwise, it'll just sound better if it's louder. That's just kind of, our ears think louder is better. So the more you can level match those, you can really check on and off to see if you're improving it or not. And I'm a big fan of subtractive EQ. I probably do subtractive 80% of the time and additive the other 20. Tim, I've never used Neutrino, so I can't speak to that. I don't even know what it is. Here's one from Wesley. Just started your mix together because I wanted to learn how to use Studio One better. I've been using Pro Tools for years, and the videos have been very useful. Great. And I don't think I see any other questions. Okay, other than SM7, this is from Ben. What are your go-to mic choices? The SM7B, go-to for almost anything. I really like the Cascade Fathead for guitar amps, along with an SM57. And then I really like the Mini K47 from Roswell Audio as a large diaphragm condenser. Doesn't work every time, but it's a pretty cool mic. And I'm out of time. Thanks for listening. See you next week, 1 p.m. Tuesday. Bye.